Okay, perfect. Good evening, everyone. Good to be here. So I'm Shashi Krishna. I'm with the International School Aberdeen. This is my first time presenting on a platform like this. Good to be part of this group. And a little bit about myself. Currently, I teach 6 to 12 computing. We are predominantly an IB school. That is kind of the end goal of what kids take in grades 11 and 12. I'm still getting used to the categories of which year groups you call what. So I'm going to stick with the American way of doing this. So 6 to 12 is middle school and high school. 3 years of middle school, 6, 7, 8, and high school is 9, 10, 11, and 12. So the diploma program and the MYP, the middle years program, is what my primary experience has been. 21 years in education, 4 countries, and I must say Scotland is the best so far. So loving it here, and it's been great. Um, Today, I just wanted to quickly share some of my reflections on what I've seen in all my years of teaching programming. In some ways, I'm kind of going backwards because I started with the IB Computer Science in the diploma, and back then, um, text-based languages, in many ways, even now, kind of rule the roost. And so, early 2000s, 2000 is when I started teaching. Uh, the first quarter was all about C++, Visual C++, and Visual Basic. They wanted to do kind of go towards object-oriented programming. Um, it still suffered, computer science suffered from not knowing where it belonged. And it kept jumping between what we call the groups. So it was in the arts for a few bits, and then it went to the languages, and now currently it's in the sciences. Personally, I think computer science is so holistic, it belongs everywhere. So much that it belongs nowhere. And everything, every subject, I think, has a way in which they can benefit from computing and computing-based solutions. By the mid 2000s, we had kind of progressed towards Java, and by 2010 onwards, Python has been kind of, not surprisingly, very popular given its ease with the language and the structure and the grammar. Um, the end goal still remains text-based in terms of what kids write on the exams, and even so in the IGCSEs. I just had my first group of IGCSEs last year, decent results. It was a relief. Not knowing the system, figuring out the labyrinth of documentation and all that was really fun. A good learning experience, and I feel more prepared now for the next year. But with Scratch and other block-based coding coming into the market, the whole idea was to bring it down further into middle years and elementary. And that in many ways is kind of where the scope and sequence for the schools I've been in comes into picture. The work with this kind of sequence has taken more momentum in my current school at ISA, where there's a really big shift in the middle years program. That's grade 6, 7, and 8, which is 11-year-old to 13, 14-year-olds. Trying to look for an alternative that can kind of sort of bridge the fun and the interesting stuff they've done with block-based coding in elementary with the more semi-serious kind of database connected, exam-oriented, algorithm-based kind of approach that the higher grades kind of follow with Python and Java. To that end, so in many ways, this is the first year I've actually spent some time researching this. I've been wondering about this for the last 5 years at least, if not more, what the transition will look like for kids who have been so into block-based coding, drag and dropping things, not worrying about the language syntax, not worrying about spelling mistakes and all that stuff. How do they transition into something that can potentially give them more power? Now, each approach obviously has its pros and cons, but the way I try to think of it is context comes first. It doesn't really matter what the content is, doesn't matter what the language is, why are you doing it, what do you hope to get from it, and who will benefit from it, right? And so for the kids to make that leap from something colorful and easy and seemingly fun to something that seems very text heavy, something that is it seems like the code for the code, right? It's like a meta code is an interesting one. I use the graphic specifically because I've used that for many years to explain the difference between computer science and IT. And I've had parents and students come to me and ask me, what exactly the difference? And I keep telling them IT is the audience and computer science is the magician. In some ways, the same kind of comparison works with the block and text coding also, because in many ways, we're kind of taking the kids behind the scenes of how those blocks came to be and helping them kind of think about, oh, behind all this stuff, there's still many lines of code that work to make these things happen. And to that end, we've started some interesting initiatives at my school. And one of the things, obviously, as Ian mentioned, is the Microsoft Make Code. Oh, sorry, not Ian. It's coming down the line. I remember seeing that on the list today. You'll hear more about it. We've had reasonable success. It's a work in progress. Kids coming out of elementary, this is grade six, the very first year of middle years, start with block coding and gradually using the JavaScript Python option, get into text-based kind of coding. Again, the cross-curricular link is a must. They have to create products for other classes. And so there's always the element of relevance of why we are doing it and what real purpose it has, in addition to just, obviously having fun. The other platform I really found success with this year, rather last year, was P5JS, and that's a JavaScript framework which uses completely functional programming. So kids essentially have less stress about syntax. It's JavaScript, sure, but the learning curve is pretty much the same as you would imagine in any text-based environment. But with this, what happens is it kind of already has a lot of important functions built in for you, and all you're doing as a programmer is providing parameters and values to it. The beauty about this is that it creates a visual interface almost immediately. They also have auto refresh, which is sometimes a pain because kids, just want quick things. They're just so used to seeing quick things happen on the screen. It can be a challenge to tell them, listen, let's just finish the code and then you can to try to run the program. But it's been successful. This is an example of one of my students' work. He designed a translator, very comprehensive piece of project there, which kind of helps people learn Norwegian. And he also recorded himself speaking out the words, and he uploaded those MP3s onto the website where the MP3 plays when you click on the button. Now, this is a kid who had very minimal programming experience. He was coming from largely a block-based kind of an experience, but after the initial kind of challenges that he faced, he still managed to create something meaningful for somebody who's looking for a translation tool. Here's another example. This kid, again, was coming from a math background, wanted to do something for his math class, created a simple currency converter using the same idea that you have these functions that just take values and you're kind of filling them as you go. And this girl, I say specifically girl because it's one of the big missions for us this year is to encourage more girls into computing, and especially in higher education, because my IB computer science is still to see that first girl walk into the classroom. And I'm hoping that with more marketing and more kind of PR of this kind, girls will get into the market there. Today, in fact, was our first girls club, inspired by Tony and her dress code. We've started an ISA coding club for girls. Healthy participation, 14 girls in my first session, very nice. And all of them are working on independent projects. And this is one of the things that I'm offering as something they can teach themselves as they go forward. The other thing, obviously, many of you might have used in your settings is App Labs. Very visual with the option of, it's a blend, so you can actually kind of use a drop down to select certain elements from what you're trying to add to the screen. Very relatable. You can switch between modes, and I think that is the biggest thing that I have learned is that kids need to be exposed to both of them to let them understand how they're different and how they're the same. And I think that level of customization then starts sinking in as they start building, again, any kind of product that is aimed at being used elsewhere. So taking that knowledge out of the computer science or IT classroom. This is a new one for us, CoSpaces, a VR environment where coding plays a very big role. They have a beautiful gallery. If those of you are interested, might want to take a look at it. We bought a 100-seat license, cost us about, I don't know, you can take a look at the license plans. And they got really into it. They give you plenty of templates to work with, and you can essentially design anything you want. And really strong cross-curricular links. Any subject they have representing a story they're reading in English, or representing a scene from history that they're learning about, they can recreate it using the 3D imagery. And the cool thing about it is that they also still have the block option and the text option. So another good way to kind of push them from drag and drop into, listen, here's what the text piece looks like. What do you think you can do with it to get more control over your environment? Apart from all this, I've been kind of looking out and encouraging more kind of girls into the clubs and stuff. And Hedy is another resource I found recently, which is really cool, and it's free. And I think we also have a JIT which you can fork and kind of customize in your own way with more options and stuff. So please take a look at that. And this is a recent one, Wolf.js. What it does is it creates this visual on the left, and it kind of makes these blocks for you to kind of just click on. and it kind of pastes the code to the right. And I think just giving kids the opportunity to study the code rather than just click and drag and just assume it'll work, I think it's a great way to keep that parallel to each other, side by side, and give them an additional kind of onus in saying that, oh, here's why it is doing what it's doing. What can I do with the text now to play around and make it do something different? Big takeaways. I will keep it short. um, Despite all this, there are obviously the students who still prefer block coding, but because the external examinations for Cambridge and IB still remain text-based, pseudocode-based, the push is still towards making sure that they understand language structures and keywords and stuff. Um, Letting them just have those two modes on, as I said, is a great way to motivate them to think beyond what the options are available. Try to challenge themselves to try and look at, at the end of the day, kids want to be challenged, right? Despite what they say, they might look stressed, but they really are craving for a challenge somewhere. And I think this is a good way to kind of push them between those two modes. And also kind of disconnecting the idea that platform is more relevant than the thinking, right? So if we can highlight that 90% of it, of any programming, is just thinking about what you want to build, why do you want to do it, and who will it help, right? If those are the three pillars of what you're trying to do, then the typing part of it or dragging dropping part of it becomes less relevant. So I think kids get so fixated sometimes with syntax and the way it looks, or the way the system works, that they lose focus of why they're doing it and what they want to build. And of course, it's an ongoing process. We are all learning at the same time. God knows, I've learned so much about all this in the last, just 8 months as I do it, and watch kids kind of, grow as a result of it. And many of them end up taking the next level of it, and they come in expecting to be asked to write code in text, despite having a predominantly strong block-based background. So that's me, basically. I don't know if that's helpful. Thank you.